Harlem Network News is here as the fearless leader, Reverend Sharpton, is presented at the AME Church to celebrate Dr. King today. No justice, no peace. Justice, no peace. Justice, no peace.
What do we want? What do we want? What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
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 Hug the person next to you. Tell them you love them.
Oh yes. Harlem Network News, we love you all. Forward ever and backward never.
You may be seated. Several weeks ago, when it was announced that this inauguration of Donald Trump was going to take place on Martin Luther King Day, we decided in National Action Network that we would have our public policy forum on Saturday as our Saturday rally and be in Washington, because we want people to see the tale of two cities in one district. When Donald Trump was president before, he went in the Oval Office and he hung a portrait of his favorite president. His favorite president was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was the president that nominated to the Supreme Court Judge Roger Taney. Judge Roger Taney was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that rendered the Dred Scott decision that blacks had no rights that anyone was bound to respect. That is Donald Trump's hero. On this side of town, Martin Luther King Jr. gave his life, shed blood, and died to open up America for everybody, blacks, whites, gays, straights. It didn't matter. There's two different occasions in town. We're going to take an oath today that we're with Dr. King as he takes an oath to come back and bring Andrew Jackson into the White House. While I was on my way here, they said to me that President Trump called the mayor of New York and late night, invited him to come down to the inauguration. I said, well, he should have called, because I got him in town anyway, Corey Weiss. Why should he have called Corey Weiss? From you around the country don't know. In 1989, I'm sorry, 90, there was a white female viciously beat, despicably raped in Central Park. New York police went and corralled 5 young black and brown men, coerced them into signing confessions, put them in jail. One of their mothers called us. We had just started National Action Network. We went and stood up for them. They called me everything but a child of God. Said that I was condoning raping and beating and demagoguery. But I stood up for them. And some 13 years later, a young man in his cell confessed his cellmate. He said, "You ever heard of the Central Park 5? Cellmate said, "Yeah, I remember that." He said, "You know, they didn't do that, I did." The cellmate, trying to get favor to get himself out of jail early, told the warden. And they went and did the DNA check and found out the guy in the cell matched the dress of the bloodied woman that had been beaten. They had to therefore let it turn around and exonerate these 5 young men. Corey Weiss did 13 and a half years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. Others, 4 of them, time in jail. Donald Trump took out an ad in the newspapers and said, "Bring back the death penalty and execute these young men." And even when the city of New York said that we have to compensate them for the time they served that they were coerced into, he said, "Don't give them a dime." This summer, National Action Network took some of them on tour. And some of the political, they talk about they gave some money for it. No, we took money to bring them on tour to tell the country the Central Park 5 story. We endorsed no candidate. We wanted the folk to know what candidates were. So I thought the least I could do for Mr. Trump is bring one of the Central Park 5 to town. I'm sure he want to invite him. I want him to know Corey Weiss is still alive. There is no death penalty. Raise your hand, Corey Weiss. How are you, Mr. Trump, on Martin Luther King Day? Go pardon folks that beat up police officers. How are you, Mr. Trump, on the birthday or the federal holiday of a Prince of Peace and nonviolence, going to excuse those that caused death of Capitol Police in the nation's capital? How dare you, Mr. Trump? How dare you on King Day talk about making heroes out of haters? How dare you on a federal holiday for the man that brought the Poor People's Campaign to the United States, that you bring some tech billionaires to church this morning that need to be repenting for the disinformation and the sinful assimilation. If everybody else is scared of you, I wasn't scared of you in 1990, and I'm not scared of you now. The problem is, we got too many folks scratching where they ain't itching, laughing at what's not funny. We fought too hard. We shed too much blood. We spent too many nights in jail. to think that Trump can turn us around. I want to be in Washington to let you know so you didn't have to hear rumor. We right here. We are not going back. Now, Donald Trump used to try, even after we marshaled him, act like he was gonna be all different. He gave free offices to the Wall Street project of Reverend Jesse Jackson for a year. When I was head of Ministers Vision Rainbow. Came to National Action Network's convention, 2002. Reporters don't do no research. They just write everything he said. Then he came back in 2006. Now he called me a racist and a con man. Well, was I a con man when you used to come to our convention? Was I a con man when you gave Jesse free office space? You will be whatever it is to put you ahead. But some of us are standing on the same things that we always stood for. And some of us are not going to change now. You got some walking around. First of all, they lied and said that they're going to get all the black men to vote for them. Look at the facts. That did not happen. But the fact of the matter is that under the 4 years that you were in before, George Floyd happened. Ahmaud Arbery was killed in Brunswick, Georgia. Breonna Taylor happened. You never stood up one time for justice for any of them. Never uttered a word of justice. And we got by. We built and had one of the largest gatherings in this district. We brought 200,000 people to the nation's capital around George Floyd. I call the march in a pandemic. You were right in the White House. We marched for Ahmaud Arbery. We convicted the police in George Floyd. We convicted the police in Ahmaud Arbery. We showed even under you we would fight and win anyhow, and we gonna fight these next 4 years no matter what you say. When he won in 16, he brought in more people to Congress and the Senate than he brought in this time. Though he got more votes, he brought in less coattail. So we got an easier fight. There ain't but 4 or 5 votes in the Senate between him and them, and ain't but about 3 in the Congress. They act like we don't know how to tell these people, y'all got to run for re-election, and we'll come in there and deal with that. That's why we got people from all over the country that rode buses all night long. Some couldn't even come from the South that we'd hide the buses because of the weather. But we said we coming anyhow. Because we don't want the only story coming out of Washington today that some billionaires went to church. Tell them some regular organizing people, black and white, Latino, gay and straight, came to Washington to church to put them on notice that we are not going to be turned around.
All right. Don't let nobody turn us around. This is Harlem Network News, standing firm. Thank you.
Everything that Dr. King stood for is at risk with this president and this Congress. What is Dr. King known for? Standing up for economic rights, standing up for equal rights, standing up for civil rights. And all of that, this president, against women's right to choose, against equal rights for gays, against the whole question of diversity, equity, and inclusion. On the record. Against voting rights, wants to bring it back to states' rights. So it's not even about me against Trump, it's about him against Dr. King's principles. He said he wants to open up the files on Dr. King and Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy's death. Well, that is good. But you should also open up the books of Dr. King and read them. If you read Dr. King's books, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, you would know why we needed diversity and equity and inclusion. Let me break one or two things down. I'll let y'all take the oath. So I know folk got to get on the road and start snowing someplace again. When blacks were brought here in 1619, we were brought here as a result of slave trade. Slave trade meant that there was an economic arrangement. They justified it by dehumanizing who they traded. They traded some for some blacks by paying off others blacks in Africa. Am I right? So that's why it ain't just a black and white thing, because some black folks sold us out in the first place.
Shay, tell it, speak that truth to power. This is Harlem Network News. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And we see you, Dawn Jones, board member, Harlem. We see you. We see you, Dawn Jones. We see you.
1619. The biggest ports of enslaved Africans was in Charleston, South Carolina, and New York. That's where Wall Street came from. They built the wall to protect the colonialists from the Native Americans. Named it Wall Street, they built it with free labor. Now, watch this. The Mel McMurray, one of our board members, from 1619 on.
This is a lesson in history.
They didn't even write the Declaration of Independence and declare their independence from King George until 1776, which meant we had already been slaves 150 years before the country ever became independent. You worked us before there was a country. Not only did you work us, you broke us down. Took our families, sold mama to Alabama, sold daddy to Mississippi, sold our brothers and sisters to North Carolina, never to reconcile. And now you got the nerve to get on Fox talking about what happened to the black family. That's what happened to the black family.
Very important that we understand our history. In the spirit of Sankofa, if we don't know what happened,
we work with no wages.
You got to know the past, the present, and to look to the future. Harlem Network News.
If whites, because there were some whites that were always abolitionists, if they were caught teaching us how to read and write, they'd be prosecuted. And for all those years, we were in that circumstance. Then they decided they did not want to humiliation and the continuation of being called names in a world stage. And people started rising up. William Lloyd Garrison, a white from New England, and Frederick Douglass, a runaway slave. I was at a seminar a few years back, Reverend Acre, and everybody was talking about the talent that some of the slaves had to have. And I thought it was one of the most ridiculous things I ever heard, Bishop Mason, is that some folk talk about what kind of slave they could be. Some singing slaves, some dancing slaves, some eloquent slaves. I ain't never wanted to be nothing but a runaway slave. We got into the 1700s, headed into the 1800s, and there was the division in the country between the North and the South. And Abraham Lincoln got elected president, and they began to separate the country. And they declared the South was going to secede and form the Confederacy. Now watch this. Lincoln said we must fight to save the Union. Garrison and Frederick Douglass said we need to end slavery. He said, no, this is not about slavery, it's about the Union. And they declared war and fought. Jefferson Davis became the president of the Confederacy, Abe Lincoln the president of the Union, and they fought for years, 4 or 5 years. And when they started losing at Shiloh and Petersburg and started getting north, coming down the Potomac River where we near now, that's when Lincoln decided reluctantly, maybe y'all are right, I'll free the slaves in the South and let them join the Union Army. Y'all need to stop saying Lincoln freed the slaves freed Lincoln. Lincoln promised in Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, that at midnight, slaves would be free. That's why, Sean, we have watch night service different than anybody else. Because watch night was, for us, whether with midnight, we'd be able to walk off the plantation. And when midnight struck, we walked off, but remember now, we walked off with no money. We'd worked for 246 years and never got paid. We had no education. It was against the law to read and write. We had no family structure because you broke up our family, named our children after yourself. We were standing there with nothing. The only thing we had was our ability to convene and congregate. That was the birth of the black church. Why are we in church today? Because all we had was the faith in God and the black church, and say, on this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. We fought and won the Civil War. For 12 years, they had Reconstruction. They killed Lincoln. Andrew Johnson came back in, backlash. Killed Reconstruction, went all the way to Blessed versus Ferguson.
I got you. Thank you.
It said that
okay.
blacks could be on the We were defeated not just because, as Reconstruction went in, they formed the Ku Klux Klan, White Citizens Council, but what turned us back
in 10 minutes,
and what reduced our humanity was not just the white supremacists in the white robe. It was the white supremacists on the Supreme Court in the black robes. They changed the laws and made Jim Crow legal. And therefore lynching became the order of the day. They lynched 5,000 blacks between the end of Reconstruction and the 1950s. They lynched more blacks after slavery than during slavery. Because they didn't kill us in slavery because they needed slaves. NAACP was founded, Urban League founded early 20th century to fight slavery. And it was not until the mid-1900s, the mid-20th century, that we started getting some victories back. Adam Clayton Powell had a Harlem bus boycott. Thurgood Marshall won 54 Supreme Court decision. And then in 55, a thin, diminutive black woman named Rosa Parks sat down in the front of the bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and refused to give up her seat. I know Trump gonna say all this don't mean it. I spoke at her funeral. I knew Mrs. King. I work with mine. I think I know more about King than you do. I come out the King movement. You with the Don King movement. There's a difference. We saw when she sat down in front of the bus and she was arrested because the law was that she had no right to sit in the front. A black preacher in that town named Martin Luther King got with the other ministers. And Alfonso David, they said the law is against us. Society is against us. But one thing they cannot control is they can't make us spend our dollars on them buses. And they made up their mind that it was better to walk in dignity than ride in shame. It may be inconvenient, but I'd rather walk with my pride than take your low-down ride. Martin Luther King did not go into history singing hymns. He did not go into history making eloquent speeches. He could do both. He went into history because he taught the people in Montgomery and later people around the world, if we discipline our dollars, we would make folk understand they have to respect us and regard us. Donald Trump just said in his inaugural address that he is going to end DEI this week. He's going to put out his executive orders. You have all these corporations that are saying they're going to back up off DEI. And why do we have DEI? We had DEI because you denied us diversity. You denied us equity. You denied us inclusion. DEI was a remedy to the racial institutional bigotry practiced in academia and in these corporations. Now you want to put us back in the back of the bus We gonna do the Dr. King Rosa Parks on you. We gonna call you out one by one, and we gonna shut you down. I've talked with Mark Morial of the Urban League. I've talked to others. We're putting together a council. I'm going to release the names this week. Alfonso David, for 90 days, they're going to do a study of what companies have pulled out of DI and what companies have a small margin of profit. And we in 90 days are going to announce the 2 companies that we're going after. And we're going to ask everybody in this country, black, white, brown, gay, straight, woman, trans, don't buy where you're not respected. Donald Trump can't make us buy your stuff. The Senate can't make us buy your stuff. In the name of Dr. King, we're going to do what Dr. King did. Trump tweeted the other week, I'm a con man. Don't call me the coin man. I'm going to stop the coins from dropping in the wrong place. Forgot who Dr. King was? Dr. King was a boycotter. Dr. King shut down the bus company. We sitting up here letting companies talk to us like we ain't got no leverage. Take the bass out of your voice. Talk to me like I'm a grown man. I'm sitting up watching the TV after I worked out this morning. Got Elon Musk and all them sit up in church. Like we crazy. They gonna decide our fate. You didn't decide our fate in slavery. You didn't decide our fate with our grandmama sitting in the front of the bus. You must have forgot who we are. We are the ones that took everything you got and we still here. We're the ones that took bad food and made it soul food. We're the ones that knew science and astrology. You don't know who you messing with. Country. You can run any lie you want on us. You done everything you could to us, yet we still here. Ford asked me, well, what do you think about Donald Trump always taking shots at you? First of all, how could I be offended by a man with 34 felonies? I'm a minister. I pray with felons. I don't get into back and forth with them. So I want you to be ready and attentive in these 90 days as we go down the list. Now, in these 90 days, I'm going to start in Harlem in a couple of weeks. Those companies that have come out and say, no, we're going to stand with DEI. I'm going to buy some National Action Network we go pay for some of these, what do y'all call them when you go shopping? Gift cards. I think I'm gonna buy about 50, 100 gift cards, go to Costco. We're gonna support those companies that stand up and tell the truth. We're gonna change this argument. This ain't gonna be no Oval Office argument, Trump. This is gonna be an argument in the streets. We're gonna take it where it needs to be. We're gonna go and shop with those that stand up for us and break those that don't. We ain't buying no electric cars, SpaceX, none of that stuff, no how much. I ain't trying to go to the moon, I'm trying to live right here in the district. So our plan that we want to roll out today, and I want to remind the media why Dr. King is in history, and that is what we're going to do, is what King did. Trump talking about he wants to build a society of colorblind. Dr. King told us to be proud of who we were. Why do we have to be colorblind? No, we can acknowledge each other's color and treat each other equal. Why do I have to act like you ain't who you are? No, be color conscious and then respected and treated equal. We were slaves because of color. We were segregated because of color. Now you gonna be blind? Don't be blind to my history. Equal out what you made unequal. He wants us to be colorblind because then they don't owe the equalizing out, Alfonso. As long as we got to deal with color, then you got to deal with the lack of diversity. As long as you don't deal with color, you got to deal with the lack of equity. But if we colorblind, we all the same thing. We're not the same thing. But we can be on the same page. Because the same people that don't like blacks, don't like browns, don't like gays, don't like women, we all got the same enemy. And we may not agree on everything, but we got to agree we got to fight this enemy together. Lastly, Reverend, Trump is powerful. Trump won by less than 2% of the vote. And we beat him before. I ain't never been scared of somebody I already whipped. Hey, he be talking some smack for the weeks out on me. It don't matter. What I'm saying to you is that don't let them hijack what Dr. King was about. I'm a product of that movement. I work with his family. I was mentored by some of his aides. Dr. King was a fighter. Dr. King used economic leverage. Dr. King was a man that stood up for economic justice. And you can't celebrate Dr. King without celebrating what he stood for. And that's what we come today from all over the country, hundreds of us. And as we close, let me tell you this. That what made Dr. King as effective as he was is he believed in a higher power. One of the reasons Reverend Lamar, his pastor here, Reverend Lamar, is here, one of the reasons I asked Reverend Lamar to let us do this in this church is in this church. In 1895, they had Frederick Douglass's funeral on this church ground. This church, they brought Rosa Parks' body. Bible said, remove not the ancient landmarks. I wanted us to make our oath right in the same rock that sent Frederick Douglass home, that sent Rosa Parks home. This is sacred ground. I want us to stand in sacred ground and promise that we are not going to let nobody turn us around. Dr. King believed in a higher power. And every once in a while in history, we are tested. And Trump is nothing but a test. He's a test to our collective communities. He's a test to whether we can get past our sectarian differences and our philosophical disputes. He's a test as to whether we can get past our egos on who gonna get the most time in the news or who got the biggest followers on social media. It's a test. And I end by, since Lamar's here, I gotta be biblical a minute. I don't want him to say I didn't respect his pulpit. I often talk about the story. There was the war between, the battle between the Philistines and the Israelites. And in those days, they used to get up the bell on two hills and send down one from each of the opposing armies. And they would duel, and whoever won, that was the winner. The Philistines had this particular year a giant, 7 foot tall, had sword that was so heavy he had to have an armor bearer carry. And he came down in the mid-place and challenged the Israelites. Said, send me one of yours, just send me one. He said, I'll make a deal with you. He said, if you kill me, whoever you send, will be your slave. But if I kill you, then you become mine. And this big giant threatened him. He had all the power, he had all the strength. He appeared omnipotent. And all of the Israelites who've been trained in warfare, who've been to boot camp, who've been given the skills of wall mason, but they was afraid to fight this giant. But there was a little boy. He wasn't even in the army. His daddy sent him to run an errand to his brothers. And while he was running the errand, he heard about this giant. And he said, who is this giant that defies the gods of Abraham and Isaac? If nobody will fight him, I'll fight him. His brothers told him, you be quiet. You can't fight. You ain't been to boot camp. You ain't had no training. He said, that's true. I'm just a shepherd boy. But I didn't have a degree in nothing else. But one day I looked up and a lion and a bear had grabbed my father's sheep. I didn't have a degree in lion fighting. I hadn't studied bear wrestling. But somehow I fought the lion and the bear. And the same God that gave me the strength to fight the lion and the bear, that same God will help me fight Goliath. I was in Harlem, minding my own business, but they tell me there's a giant that y'all swearing in today. And they tell me y'all scared to fight that giant. I ain't been to one of the Ivy League schools, that defies Frederick Douglass. I come to Washington with my slingshot. I'm not scared of that giant. I'm not scared of that giant. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I can walk through the valley and shadow the death and fear no evil. He walks with me. He talks with me. He tells me I'm his own. I want everybody for one moment to stand and be at peace. I want you to think about what we're getting ready to do. I want you to think about how, according to the Bible, when Moses went up to see the God of the Israelites, he ran into a burning bush. And the Bible said God spoke through the bush and said, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. I call for y'all to come from all over the country to Metropolitan. But I want you to know you're standing on sacred ground. And as we get ready to take this oath, don't stand on the ground where Frederick Douglass lay. Don't stand on the ground where Rosa Parks lay, unless you're going to really do what it is we committing to do. Because we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against wickedness, principalities, wickedness in high places. I want everyone, if you are resolved, to just raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, Al Sharpton, do solemnly commit that I will stand up and rise up in the name of Dr. King, in the name of Frederick Douglass, in the name of Rosa Parks, and I will defend equality for all, diversity, equality, inclusion, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, immigration rights. I commit, I take this oath that I will not become like those I'm fighting. I'm not for violence, but I will peacefully stand against those that want to bring us down. I commit this in the house of God, on this sacred ground. So help me God. Congratulate yourself.
Okay. That was and is Reverend Dr.
I want all the ministers to come. Let's join
Al
arms when they would
Sharpton.
march in the South.
Yes. He's calling for all the ministers to come.
Think it was a little too moderate for me. But as I read my history and got to know some of the lieutenants of Dr. King, I realized it took a lot of strength to face biting dogs, to face sheriff's club nightsticks, and somehow with no defense at all, They look at biting dogs in Birmingham and say, we shall overcome. They look at people with weapons and say, we shall overcome. They look at people that had the law and they took a lot of, say deep down in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. Oh, it's a big day for the right wing. They celebrating and they gonna have their little inaugural parties tonight, but we shall overcome. They got their billionaires, but we got the God of the universe. Show you God is in charge. They plan the parade, but God controls the weather. Turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. I'm gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Amen and Ashe. A lot of food for thought. Thank you. It's been quite a day. The inauguration and now the speeches by and the rally by Dr. Reverend L. Sharpton of National Action Movement. Thank you.